Who is Klaus Schwab? Let's get into that. So he's the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. His Geneva-based World Economic Forum brings together once a year 1,000 chairmen and chief executive of the foremost global companies with another 1,000 world leaders, scientists, and journalists. And so, well, what is the World Economic Forum? Well, the World Economic Forum wants a global redesign to create public-private partnerships with the United Nations in which selected agencies operate and steer global agendas under shared governance systems. And so it says that a globalized world is probably best managed by a coalition of multinational corporations, governments, and civil service organizations, or CSOs, which it expresses through initiatives like the Great Reset and the Global Redesign. So now, what is the Great Reset? So the World Economic Forum proposed what's known as the Great Reset, which suggests that the globalized world is best managed by a self-selected coalition of multinational corporations, governments, and civil society organizations. Well, why would you do something like that? Well, because of what's known as the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Well, what is the Fourth Industrial Revolution? Jens Martens, in his book, The Role of Public and Private Actors in the Means of Implementing the SDGs, what are these? The Sustainable Development Goals, Reclaiming the Public Policy Space for Sustainable Development and Human Rights, This is part of the Interdisciplinary Studies in Human Rights. Page 209, it says, under the heading, Weakening the State, a Vicious Circle. It says, a telling example of this strategy is the report of the World Economic Forum on the future of global governance and redesign. The report postulates that the globalized world is best managed by a coalition of multinational corporations, governments, including the United Nations system, and select civil society organizations, or CSOs. And so why operate this way? What problems are they trying to solve? And further down it says, it argues that governments no longer are the overwhelmingly dominant actors on the world stage, and that the time has come for a new stakeholder paradigm of international governance. Okay, so we've heard this before. The nation states they've reached their maturity. Yeah. They're now past their prime, and it's time for them to go. They serve their purpose. It's time for them to go.
And it's kind of like these are things that we already knew, right? Hey, these are not the people that are, in charge.
Exactly.
It will just be obvious at that point,
Right.
It's one of those, give us another conspiracy theory, this one's solved, right? Yeah.
Basically.
When it finally comes out, yeah.
Right. And so now you have this idea. Further down, it argues that governments, again, are no longer the overwhelmingly dominant actors on the world stage. It's time for them to go. New stakeholder paradigm of international governance. And so, well, what does the World Economic Forum suggest? Well, the World Economic Forum, in their vision, includes a public-private United Nations in which certain specialized agencies would operate under joint state and non-state governance systems. Okay, so we're going to see the rise of the unelected bodies, of unelected officials that are making not only national but transnational decisions that affect more than one nation state.
Intergovernmental, I think that's the word they use.
There you go. And so, well, where can this information be found? Well, everybody's business, strengthening international cooperation in a more interdependent world. Page 9 says, the time has come for a new stakeholder paradigm of international governance, analogous to that embodied the stakeholder theory of corporate governance, of which the World Economic Forum itself was founded. Okay, well, then what do they think should be done? The state-based core of the system needs to be adapted. They keep harping on this same thing. Nation states,
they have to go.
Yeah, it's time for you guys to go. But adapted to what exactly? Well, to a more complex, bottom-up world in which non-governmental actors have become a more significant force. Well, why would you want to do something like this? Well, if you're someone like BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard, and you can put your money where your mouth is, then you're the assets under management by the world's largest asset management companies like BlackRock and Vanguard are upwards of $10 trillion. end of 22. That's higher than the GDP of Japan and Germany and most nations. So BlackRock is a country within its own right, without borders, without citizens, without democracy, without any of that stuff.
But with all the power, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so page 36, effective global governance requires many others, local and national governments, private individuals and corporate actors, the non-governmental organizations and social networks of civil society, our media, culture, and religious organizations, and more. Well, what does Santa Claus Schwab want to do about this? Well, he says, those who work in all these places must begin to think globally, to place the welfare of the global community higher than their priorities. So you have 400 civil society organizations and 40 international networks heavily criticized a partnership agreement between the World Economic Forum and the United Nations and called for the UN Secretary General to end it. Did he end it? Well, let's see. The letter called The Corporate Capture of Global Governance. The World Economic Forum Partnership Agreement is a dangerous threat to the United Nations. Now think of this, right? So the United Nations was set up by the Roundtable organizations to do exactly what this
Setup, yeah.
is set to do, right? So so you're asking the people that are actually doing this thing that now you've been able to identify, you're going to ask them to stop doing what they're doing, as if there's some other entity to appeal to.
Yeah, it's like asking the government to give up some power.
It's like asking a corrupt cop to investigate himself.
Yeah.
Right? So what did they outline the problem to be exactly? Well, the first step towards their global governance vision is to redefine the international system, consisting as a wider, multifaceted system of global cooperation in which intergovernmental legal frameworks, there it is, and institutions are embedded as core. Okay, so now remember the corporate state dissolving the wealth of the nation state, putting in the legal framework. Is the question before, why would these wealthy corporations then just give up all of that wealth? They're not, because it's being woven. The reason why they're able to do what they're doing is because that aspect is woven into the legal framework of this entire the entire panoply of the idea.
They were even allowed to get that big because this is the end goal right now.
There you go. Right, they're just fulfilling their role.